This is 14-year-old Kennedy Miller from Morrisvale, West Virginia. She lost her life on April 17th of this year because she had a disorder with food that lasted several years, and her mom never got her the treatment that she needed. Deputies were dispatched out to the home regarding a death, and when they arrived that day, they found her laying in the bathroom floor. They said that she was so emaciated, she was in a skeletal state. So it prompted an investigation as to what happened. This is her mother, 49-year-old Julie Ann Stone Miller. Apparently, she was well aware of this disorder and knew that Kennedy's health was deteriorating by the day, but she failed to get her the treatment she needed, physically or mentally. According to the grandma, Kennedy hadn't really eaten much of anything in the past few months, and her health was so bad in the 4 to 5 days leading up to her death that she couldn't even function on her own. She also stated that Kennedy hadn't gone to school since either late 2019 or early 2020, and that she had only stepped outside of the house 2 to 3 times in the past 4 years. Julie was arrested and charged with felony child neglect that resulted in a death. She's being held on a $250,000 bond, and it's looking like so far she hasn't entered in a plea. And an autopsy is currently pending for Kennedy. I don't understand as a mother how she could just sit back and watch that happen, like watch her child deteriorate right in front of her eyes every day and not even do anything about it.
This is one of the most heartbreaking true crime cases that I've ever heard of. It happened in 2017 and it's still unsolved, so let's talk about it. This is Maggie Long. She was a 17-year-old senior at Platte Canyon High School when she was found brutally murdered in her Bailey, Colorado home. It was December 1st, 2017 when Maggie left her high school to run home and grab some water and cookies. Her plan was to go back to the high school after picking up the snacks to attend a concert that she helped organize. But when she got home, she was attacked by at least 3 people who were in the middle of robbing her home. A physical fight then broke out between Maggie and the suspects. They ended up burning down her home, and sadly, Maggie was burned alive. The assailants then stole a handgun, an AK-47 style rifle, 2,000 rounds of ammunition, a green safe, and jade figurines. Authorities arrived at the home around 7 p.m. after a 911 call came in stating that the house was on fire and that there were people inside causing damage. The call reported that there was at least 1 man inside the home. When authorities arrived and after putting out the fire, they found Maggie's remains and they ruled her death as a homicide. Sketches of the potential suspects were released in 2019, but authorities stated that at least at the time, they may have been injured in the fire, and it was possible that they have changed their appearance. They also said that it's possible that the suspects sold their cars and moved away. Maggie's murder was originally classified as a crime of opportunity, but after reviewing the case in 2021, the FBI reclassified it as a hate crime. It's now been 7 years, and whoever killed Maggie is still out there. Right now, there's a $75,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction. If you have any information about the murder of Maggie Long, please call the Maggie Long Task Force tip line at 303-239-4243.
So we all saw the video where they were talking about her and how she got beat up in prison. But let me tell you how they found out who she was. Because, you know, we don't have Netflix in prison, so a lot of people aren't going to know. Remember when I told you that the officers are the one that tell people, like, what, you know, inmates' charges are? Well, she was in prison going around saying she had a DUI. I'm going to link the article in the comments. Her former bunkie came out and said that, you know, she was walking around with her head held high, saying that she was in prison for a DUI. They said she was even stealing from other inmates, which is something that, like, you know, broke people would do. If you're still doing petty theft crimes in prison, you're low life. So one day an officer walked in and saw her sleeping and said, "You sleep pretty well for a baby killer." And that's how everyone found out that she was a baby killer. Then they found out who she was, and that's when they jumped her. Her roommate also came out saying that she would wake up screaming in the middle of the night. Good, I hope that she sees Gabrielle's face for the rest of her life. Okay, so this is part 2, and you guys want to know why is it that Pearl got beat up and not him? So remember, Pearl ended up getting a life sentence, which means that she's in general population. Unlike him, he got the death penalty. So he is sitting on death row, which means locked down 24 hours a day. He does not have a roommate. He is actually in the room by himself, which to me, he should probably be in general population so he could get the shit beat out of him. However, it's my understanding that in a men's institution, child killers like that don't hit the compound, but I'm not sure. I've heard that from other people that have been locked up, you know, guys, but like I said, I'm not sure. So if you know, want to comment and let us know how it goes in a men's institution, if he had a life sentence, would he go to general population? But anyways, to answer your question, guys, he didn't get beat up because he's sitting on death row, and Pearl got life.
So this man put antifreeze in his baby's milk because he didn't want to pay child support. So before he pays child support, he'd rather take his own baby's life. His name is Curtis Jack, and Curtis got his side piece pregnant. I say side piece because whether she knows it or not, he was engaged to be married to another woman. This other woman got pregnant. He begged her to get rid of the baby the entire pregnancy. The woman did not get rid of the baby. She had the baby, and I guess there was some complications with her because the baby went home to her mother, so the baby's grandmother. And she called him to come to the hospital to pick up some breast milk from her and take it to that baby. And that's when he put the antifreeze in the baby's milk, trying to take the baby's life. Then he told the police, I put antifreeze in the baby's milk because I didn't want to pay child support. Now, I don't know if the baby ended up in the hospital. I don't know what happened for him to tell them that. They don't say that in the article or in the news clip. He tried to take it back, but that's what he said. Now, the baby did, in fact, live, and he got 50 years. So instead of taking care of his child for at least 18 years, he now has to do 50 years in prison. And a man tells you he don't want nothing to do with that baby, or a woman tells you they want nothing to do with that baby, believe them and keep that person away from your child. Thankfully, this one survived.
A 7-year-old boy has confessed to fatally shooting a man in his sleep. The unnamed child, who is now 10, shot and killed 32-year-old Brandon O'Quinn Raspberry while he was asleep in his RV. But police struggled to find a suspect. 2 years later, the principal at the child's school called authorities after he allegedly threatened to assault and kill another student on the bus. When police interviewed the boy, he confessed to taking the gun from his grandpa's glove compartment to kill Raspberry. He says he didn't know the victim, nor did he have any reason to dislike him.
Junko had been murdered, savagely murdered. 17-year-old Junko Furuta failed to come home from her shift at her part-time job. Now, Junko, it definitely wasn't like her to stay out late without telling her parents or her brothers. She was supposed to come back after 8:30 p.m., but her family didn't go straight to the police. Instead, her father Akira, her mother, and her 2 brothers called everybody that they knew to ask if they had seen Junko, or if they had heard from her and might know where she had been. They also decided that they were going to just kind of take the search into their own hands and start searching the town by foot themselves. Finally, by November 27th, though, which was a full 2 days later, they couldn't ignore the reality of their situation any longer. She was missing. So that is when they decided to file the missing persons report with the police. And later that same day, their phone rang. I don't know who picked up exactly, if it was Junko's parents or if it was one of her brothers, but whoever it was, they must have been so incredibly relieved when they heard Junko's voice on the other end of the line. But then, whatever feeling or sense of relief they had in that moment, it must have just quickly dissolved. Because then Junko said that she had run away. She told her family that she wasn't in any immediate danger, that she was just staying with a friend. So the things that Junko said on this call were not matching anything that her dad and the rest of the family knew about her. It was totally out of character. But they didn't have any other information about where she had gone or why. So there wasn't much else that they could do. They could just wait and hope that Junko would come home, or that at the very least the police would find her and confirm that she was safe wherever she was. But even with the authorities actively investigating, the family didn't get any updates on Junko for over 4 more months. Then on March 29th, 1989, detectives finally found Junko, and they reached out to her family with some truly devastating news. Junko was dead. When Junko's mother went to go and view the body, it was practically unrecognizable. Junko was emaciated, and I mean to the max. At the time of her death, she weighed a little over 65 pounds, and her body was covered in scars. There were signs that she had been beaten, battered, and just horribly, horribly tortured and mangled.
That clip was recorded during the partial sinking of the Costa Concordia, a cruise ship that partially sunk in 2012 and killed 32 people. At the time that it was built, the Costa Concordia was one of the biggest cruise ships in all of Italy. Now, a common practice is to break a champagne bottle against a ship before its first cruise. But interestingly, in 2005, when they swung that champagne bottle against this ship, it failed to break. This is considered an extremely bad omen, and people had no idea of what was to come. So on January 13th, 2012, the ship set sail from Rome, Italy. And on the western coast of Italy, the ship steered right into a rock, which ripped a 174-foot-long gash in the ship's side. Shortly afterwards, the ship lost all of its power and it began to sink. So shockingly, an order to abandon ship wasn't issued until over an hour after the initial impact. And if they would have issued this earlier, more people probably would have survived. But yeah, unfortunately, 32 people drowned in this incident, and the footage is terrifying. Eventually, the captain of the ship was charged with abandoning his ship and manslaughter, causing a maritime disaster, and lying to authorities, and he was subsequently sentenced to 16 years in prison, basically for his negligence. If you want to hear more true crime stories like this one, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
Paul Flores has been attacked in prison for the second time since he was convicted and sentenced for Kristen Smart's murder. Kristen Smart went missing from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in 1996, and technically she remains missing to this day because her body has never been found, but she has long been presumed dead. Her case went cold for years and remained that way until a podcast called Your Own Backyard brought the case back into the public eye starting in 2016. In 2021, Paul Flores, who was a classmate of Kristen's and was a suspect from the start, was arrested for her murder. After going to trial, he was convicted in 2022 and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. On April 10th, prison staff witnessed an inmate stabbing Flores in the recreation yard. 2 inmate-manufactured weapons were then found at the scene. He sustained multiple wounds to his back, neck, hands, and head, and he was transported to a hospital outside the prison. But that same day, he was back at the Pleasant Valley State Prison in fair condition, and it seems like he is fully recovered now. The name of his attacker has not been released, but the inmate has been placed in restricted housing during the ongoing investigation. And this is the second time he has been attacked. Back in August, Flores was attacked by another inmate named Jason Richard Boudreau, who hashed Flores in the neck. He was hospitalized for 2 days after that attack before returning to the prison. Attorney Harold Messick, who is representing Flores during the restitution portion of his case, said he is planning to request that Flores be moved to another facility. This week, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation has said that his case is under review for him to be moved to a protective housing unit outside of general population, due to the fact that he's now been attacked twice. And it's unclear what exactly led to these attacks, if it was because of the crime that he committed to get him in prison or of something he has done while in prison. If I had to guess, he'll probably be moved to protective housing, because if they keep having to take care of him medically, it's just going to add up in cost for them. But we will see, and I will keep you guys updated.
This looks like a sick headline from The Onion, but unfortunately it's very real. A child in Texas just confessed to a cold case murder that they committed at just 7 years old. And the way all of this finally came out is equally as chilling and bizarre. On April 11th of this year, the now 10-year-old boy got into a fight with another student on the school bus. And during this altercation, the boy threatened to kill the other student. So he's talking to school officials about this altercation when all of a sudden, he's like, by the way, I also shot and killed a man 2 years ago. And he starts giving details about the crime that only the killer would know. Let's go back to January 2022 when the murder occurred. The owner of Lazy J RV Park near Nixon was asked to do a welfare check on one of their residents. That resident was 33-year-old Brandon Raspberry, who hadn't shown up to work in a couple days. Ultimately, they would find Brandon deceased from a single gunshot wound to the head. Police basically had nothing to work with. Nothing was stolen. They interviewed everyone at the RV park. No one had a problem with Brandon, and he'd actually just moved in 4 days prior to being killed. So they can't go any further in their investigation, and the case goes cold for 2 years until this boy's confession. Apparently, the boy was visiting his grandfather who lived at the RV park. He'd actually never met Brandon, he'd just seen him walking around the park. And for seemingly no reason, this child decided to kill him. After grabbing a gun out of his grandfather's truck, he crept into Brandon's RV and shot him as he slept. Then put the gun back where he found it as if nothing ever happened. He also told police his grandfather pawned the gun, and they were able to locate that the very next day. So either the grandfather pawned it recently, or the murder weapon's just been sitting at a pawn shop since. The age of criminal culpability is 10 in Texas, so this boy won't face any charges for the murder he committed at age 7. However, he is being charged for the threat against another student. I really hope this kid is getting all the psychiatric help he needs, because he ultimately took a life and seemingly has no remorse for it.
DJ said that his main motive was that David smoked too much of their weed. So on the night of the 13th, David, DJ, Bradley, and Austin were all over at his house. They were hanging out in that camper trailer, they were smoking weed, hanging out, and DJ gave Eric some kind of signal. And then Eric got up and he left the room. He didn't stay out of the room for more than a few minutes. So I don't know if he was curious about how the murder was going or what, but he came back to be with the others eventually. Except at this point, when he came back in, David wasn't in the room. DJ, Austin, and Bradley had locked him in a bathroom. Now, David didn't seem too worried at this point. He actually thought his friends were just kind of messing around with him, maybe playing a prank, you get it. But then they let him out of the bathroom. They turned off the lights and they started beating him. And that's when David got really scared. He apparently begged them to stop, but nobody would. They even used the gun to start pistol whipping him. So once they found a pretty remote area, they pulled David out of the car, they walked him into the woods, laid him on the ground, and then DJ shot him in the head. At least, that's how things happened the first time that Eric told his story. But the police made him come in for 2 other interrogations, and each time Eric gave them a confession, it would change. One of the biggest differences was that a couple of times Eric said that the killer was not DJ. It was someone who was listed in the police report as AB. Those are Austin Barrett's initials. By now, the detectives were convinced that Eric was the ringleader in all of this. Even if they didn't know who actually fired the fatal shot, they still had no idea what the motive was for David's murder. But they were confident that Eric was behind all of it, and that Austin, DJ, and Bradley helped him pull off this crime, and then helped dump the body.
So the picture behind me is depicting some creepy police sketches, and one of them is a little off. Number 8 is actually a sketch of a leprechaun spotted in Mobile, Alabama. But I want to know, which one of these scares you the most? Which one is more uneasy? I don't know. I feel like number 2, I'm just like looking at it and I'm just like, oh, I wouldn't want to encounter that in real life. Looks like some sort of humanoid trying to blend in as a human. I believe number 4 is associated with Celine Delgado Lopez. She was some sort of mystery woman on this news television about true crime. But I believe it's also associated with some Louisiana killer. Is number 3 a biker? And who drew number 1's hair? That doesn't seem possible. Number 5, definitely really scary, giving me American Horror Story vibes. Number 6 isn't too bad. Number 7 definitely looks a little menacing. As we talked about, 8 is the leprechaun spotted in Mobile, Alabama. And 9, low-key looks like Dwayne The Rock Johnson with some hair. Let me know which one of these police sketches are your favorite. If you guys have a favorite police sketch, comment below, let me know. And as always, these videos are for informational and entertainment purposes only.
This story has me reeling because a 10-year-old boy in Texas just confessed to an unsolved unaliving that he intentionally committed when he was 7. Buckle up because this is wild. This is Brandon O'Quinn Raspberry. He was 32 years old and living in an RV park. On January 18th, 2022, he was discovered in his home after having not showed up for work for 2 days. He had been pew-pewed in the head while he was sleeping. He'd only moved in 4 days earlier. But because the kid's name isn't being released, we'll call him Chucky. So how did it come about that Chucky was linked to this crime? On April 12th, law enforcement officers received a phone call from the principal of the Nixon Smiley Independent School District because a student had threatened to harm and unalive another student. During the investigation, they found out from other students that apparently Chucky had been telling other kids that he had unalived a man 2 years earlier. Chucky had been apparently visiting his grandfather, who only lived a couple doors down from Raspberry. Chucky at some point then went into his grandfather's truck, into the glove box, pulled out a 9mm, and walked into the man's home, where he found him sleeping. He fired it into his head, and then once again into the couch afterwards, then returned the 9mm and went on his life. Then the grandfather pawned it. Chucky even said that nothing was done to him, that he had never even met the guy, and he wasn't mad at him. Something tells me grandfather knew exactly what Chucky had done. But they were actually able to track it down from that same pawn shop. Ballistics were a match. Chucky was expelled from school and then taken to a psychiatric hospital in San Antonio for an evaluation and treatment. Then he was taken to the sheriff's office and charged with the threats that he made on the bus. Because Texas says that a child is not criminally capable until they're 10 years old, he's just going to get away with it. Like literally scot-free, they can't charge him at all. But clearly this man deserves justice, his family deserves justice of some kind. So charge the grandfather. If an adult has a pew-pew and does not properly store it and keep it out of reach of children, if that child gets your pew-pew and then commits a horrific crime, you should be charged with that crime by default. It is your fault he is no longer living. The grandfather should be charged as a co-conspirator. Because clearly this child is a sociopath, the family knew about it, and the grandfather helped cover up the crime. Or at least attempted to. What do y'all think?
What's a missing persons case that still keeps you up at night? I always think about the disappearance of Nicholas Downey and how he completely disappeared after his rental car was found abandoned. So this is 37-year-old Nicholas Downey, and he was last seen on February 27th, 2023 in Bristol, Florida. At the time he was working in Bradenton, but he'd taken a week off to go and visit his wife Holly, who was staying at a rehabilitation center in Mississippi. For the trip, Nicholas rented a Tesla through the Turo app. He was on his way back home when on February 26th, he pulled off of Interstate 10 to recharge the Tesla behind a McDonald's in Marianna, Florida. Security footage shows that someone exited the vehicle to charge it, but the footage was too blurry to know if it was actually Nicholas getting out of the car. The person then gets back into the car before pulling on a State Road 71 heading south instead of getting back on the interstate. While this was happening, the car's owner was watching its progress on the Turo app and saw the direction it was heading. This worried the owner because the car wasn't heading back to Tampa as planned, and he already had the car scheduled to be rented out by another customer the following day. So he sent Nicholas a text message to make sure that he was okay, which would have showed up on the car's dashboard, but he never got a response back. Nicholas was scheduled to go back to work the morning of February 27th, but he never showed up. Instead, that morning, the Tesla he was renting was found abandoned in Liberty County, parked between Turkey Creek and Prison Road. This area is, I guess, known as the Stoke site. But Nicholas was nowhere to be found. The car only had a little bit of charge left and the windshield was damaged. Authorities found that the car at some point had driven under a cable, and this was confirmed when they found the cable in question about 1.5 miles away with the car's white paint on it. The police contacted the vehicle's owner, who was then able to remotely unlock it. And inside the car, police found 2 phones, one belonging to Nicholas and one belonging to his wife, who wasn't allowed to have a personal phone at the rehab center. Also inside the car was a change of clothes, a McDonald's receipt, a drone that Nicholas used for work, and an unknown substance. Authorities searched the area surrounding the car by land and air, and they even brought in tracking dogs, but no trace of Nicholas has ever been found. According to a sheriff that was on the scene, he said that there were hardly any footprints surrounding the car, and that something isn't adding up. His family didn't even know about his disappearance until a few days later on March 3rd when his wife was allowed to call him, but a deputy answered instead. The car rental was without contact and done through the Turo app, so the owner of the car never actually met Nicholas. And according to Nicholas's mom, she last spoke to him around 8:30 the night he went missing, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She mentioned that Nicholas did struggle with alcohol and drugs in the past, but he's never just not reached out. They talk almost every day, so it's not like him to just disappear. It's now been a year and Nicholas is still missing. If you have any information about his disappearance at all, please contact the number on the screen.
This is a doozy of a case. You've got Sarah and Brandon that are brother and sister, but secretly were in a relationship for decades. A secret that they were willing to kill to keep. Growing up, Sarah and her older half-brother Brandon had a pretty tough childhood, which only pushed them closer together. It was a codependency that turned romantic by the time Sarah was 14 and Brandon was 18. So dark and messed up on so many levels. When Sarah was 19, she got pregnant by her older brother Brandon for the first time, and then they quickly had 3 more kids after that. Because the parents were literally brother and sister, all 4 of Sarah and Brandon's kids had developmental issues, but that didn't stop Sarah and Brandon to go on to have 2 more kids and actively trying for their 7th child together. From the outside, Sarah was a single mom to 6 kids, and her older brother Brandon was just a really helpful uncle. Sarah would claim that all 6 of her kids had the same father, but he just didn't want to be involved in their lives. So why would she keep having more kids with him? How no one caught on to this? When Sarah and Brandon's 2 older kids, Blake and Tristan, started to get older in like their preteen and teen years, they started showing these really concerning, violent behaviors. The behavior was getting so concerning that social services got involved and wanted to speak with the boys' biological father. Sarah straight up refused to give them the biological father's name, which made them so suspicious, and they were like, okay, if you're not telling me, we're gonna find out one way or another. I truly don't understand the logic here, but Sarah and Brandon decided that the only way to keep their children's genetic identity a secret was if they unalived all 6 of their children. They attempted to do this by giving all the children a large amount of medicine, and when that didn't work, they went in and unalived 14-year-old Blake and 13-year-old Tristan. The plan was then to unalive the other 4 younger children, but I think like reality kind of sank in for Sarah about what was going on and how they were all going to be arrested. Like there was no way that they could get away with this. So she barricaded herself and the 4 other children in a room and then texted a friend blaming blaming everything on Brandon and saying that he was trying to unalive all of them. That friend then called 911, and when the police showed up, they arrested both Sarah and Brandon because the kids ratted out their mom. I swear we see it so much in cases where a couple, it feels gross to even call them a couple because they're brother and sister, but when a couple are so in love that they commit crimes to be together, but then end up turning on each other the second they're caught. So I've got a lot of messages and comments asking where you can find me if this app doesn't sell in 9 months. I'm going to keep posting on here until we can't. But if you want to find me, I have a link tree in my bio that has my personal and brand new true crime IG. I have a Facebook page as well as a YouTube channel that I swear I'm going to start prioritizing now that I'm probably going to lose this account. Thank you so much for all the support, and I look forward to hanging out with you guys on those other platforms.